Today on Rebel Then King, with some other channels, we are going over the results of the Pathfinder 2e Community Class Ranking Project, starting with the bottom 9 classes. Welcome, adventurers. Here we go. You voted. The results are in. Over 500 community votes. We had lengthy discussions on the Pathfinder Creator Discord, on my videos, on other videos, and on Reddit, and we are ready to go over the best class ranking for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. First, a reminder on how all of this worked. It is a rank choice voting system. You were given all of the classes and you had to rank them 1 through 27. You don't get to skip any, you don't get to vote for anybody twice. 1 through 27, what are your favorites? And I left it kind of open as to you to determine best. I sort of figured that with enough votes, we would normalize people who are voting sheerly on mechanics, people who are voting sheerly on flavor, people who are voting with a mixture, people who are voting on the highest potential that a class can achieve, people who are voting on the average, and everything in between. The system is going to aggregate and has aggregated all of the results, and the lowest score is the winner. You know, it got the most 1s and 2s. This system also tracks the number of number 1 votes that each class got, which is interesting. And I took a snapshot of the results at about 500. I think it was 502 votes. You can still go back and look at how your votes compared to the others and see your score compared to the full list of results. Link in the description. Today's video covers the bottom 9 classes, 9 of the 27, with lots of insight from myself and some of your favorite content creators and your comments. On the note of comments, I want to know, before we get going here, what are your expectations for the bottom 9? Are there any classes that you think for sure are going to be there? Any classes that are you kind of fearing will end up in the bottom bucket because you like that class, but no, it's going to get downranked? Are there any classes that you're kind of the opposite? You are gleefully waiting to see them dredged down to the bottom depths of the class ranking. Make sure to leave some comments as we go along. There's a lot to cover, so let's get going. It has been a lot of fun seeing the votes come in and see how the rankings change as more votes are tallied. But I would say that around 200 votes, things started to settle pretty well, and there hasn't been much of a change since. And that is especially true for number 27, dead last, did not stand a chance, the Inventor. Inventor, rank 27, 4 number 1 votes. My rank, 22. Total score, 10,999.2. This is a class that frankly never fared too well in all of my class ranking videos over the years. It just doesn't fully fit the flavor nor the mechanics of the system super well. Yes, it does have the overdrive mechanic and the ability to possibly add 4 points of damage from overdrive on your strikes, including ranged strikes, mind you, can make for an incredible amount of damage in a very viable, sniper gun kind of build. But it's a check to do so, which you can critically fail and could result in hurting you. There was a comment I read, Inventor that has a chance to hurt themselves using one of their main features. Not great. Of the 3 subclass options for the Inventor, the Construct seems to be the favored choice. And although having a super weapon or super armor should be really great in theory with the other 2 subclass options, they don't seem quite as rewarding, if you ask me, as having a full set of extra feats and features like other classes get. I still remember getting excited about a build idea I had and trying to make some sort of super stealth suit armor Inventor, and honestly, it just didn't really work. It wasn't that much of a mechanical advantage, it didn't line up to what I wanted, and frankly, it is a class that I kind of barely consider in all of my character ideas. It is a class that, as was pointed out in one of my shorts, often goes forgotten. Someone commented on a short that I had about the Inventor, honestly, forgot this class existed. But to be fair here, Captain TTRPG has some additional thoughts on the Inventor.
Captain TTRPG here, and thank you so much, Rebel then King, for inviting me on to talk about one of my absolute favorite classes, the Inventor. So let me tell you why I love it so much, and maybe that'll help you find a newfound love for it, but I also don't want to ignore the fact that it does have challenges. Again, the Inventor is an intelligence-based, what I call near martials. This is a martial character that doesn't use strength or dexterity as its primary ability score, but this does use intelligence instead. So immediately we have one of our first challenges, right? For the class, you've got, okay, I'm not going to have the same chance plus to hit that, a martial that's got dex or strength will have with their weapons, but it's really not that far behind. Just a smidge behind, right? And there's some levels where we're at the same place, so it's not really going to have that big an effect. What I love about it is the versatility that comes with this class. I like having access to a lot of skills. I like being a skill monkey, but sometimes rogue or investigator just isn't for me. Inventor, being primary intelligence, is going to have a lot of skill points already, but on top of that, you're going to get crafting for free, and it's going to upgrade for free, giving you some skill feats for free, and crafting is my favorite skill outside of intimidation, so I'm going to get that anyway, so that's a huge win for me. Plus, there's other good intelligence-based skills here. I like to recall knowledge. If you like to recall knowledge, this is a great class to do that with. But then we have other features like overdrive. Overdrive is this cool, almost rage-like mechanic, right? Where I'm going to be able to do extra damage because I kind of go into this brain power overload, if you will, for the entire fight. Or, I can change it round to round. If I don't like my first result, I can take another try next round. That's okay. Yes, I have to spend an action to do this, but sometimes that added damage really is meaningful. And I do want that as an option for myself. I don't have to go into overdrive, but I like that I can to really boost myself up if I want to. Yes, there are problems with overdrive. You have to make a check and you can potentially hurt yourself, and I don't think that should really be a thing, but I still think it's a cool little angle to think about how your character does this. What does it mean? Have they set certain dials on their invention to really crank it up and overcharge them? Maybe, inject themselves. Think of somebody like Bane pumping venom into themselves, or even something like that, right? Where you've got a really hyper-intelligent character that can do cool things with their invention to make themselves even more powerful. So that's a fun angle on its own. And then you've got all the different options, whether you want to be a pet class or you want to go weapon because you want access to those advanced weapons right away that are extremely good, and then you can add more traits on top of your extremely good advanced weapon, so you can be one of the best weapon wielders out the gate because of what's accessible to you. And then of course you can do things like explode, giving you some AoE right out the gate, which not a lot of characters are going to have, right? We're talking about cantrip level damage, but it's still cantrip level damage for an AoE that you can do. And then later on, you get all these feats that help you really do incredible things. And this is where a lot of people, I think, struggle with the Inventor. You have all these cool things you can do as an Inventor, yet you're limited because of unstable. But rather than thinking about yourself as limited, unstable is almost like having a focus point. It's, I can do this really amazing thing that I wouldn't normally be able to do all the time. And hey, there might even be a chance I can do it more than once. And later on, there is a feat to let you ignore the first time an unstable doesn't go your way, and you can do it twice. So it is a lot like focus points to do cool things. I can do something like Cone of Gold. I can hit extra hard with my melee weapon, or my ranged weapon for that matter. So rather than looking at unstable as this negative thing, it's, I got to do this cool thing, and maybe there's a chance I'll get to do it again, even if that thing is very powerful for a martial character to be able to do, because as a martial, you have single target, but you also have AoE. You've got access to different damage types, things that don't come naturally to martials. Oh, and don't forget, high intelligence means you can grab those multi-class archetypes like Witch and Wizard and add a lot of spell casting that you're going to be pretty solid at. And oh yeah, roleplay the heck out of it, because this is one of the easiest classes to roleplay in the entire system. Back to you, Rebel then King.
So no, it is not all doom and gloom for the Inventor. Seriously, explosions are cool, and being able to explode as an unstable action at level 1 is a pretty nifty feature. And yes, I have always thought of these unstable actions that they do have access to a bit more like focus spells, like once per combat abilities. But given that you do have a chance to reuse them, it kind of does make them a little bit better than focus spells, actually. And I like that as a martial, you kind of have this focus spell-like ability that other martials don't have access to. It is a cool combination of mechanics. And also, with that high intelligence and crafting, you will be super useful outside of combat too. So definitely still quite a viable character option. But maybe to conclude with a quote that I saw left on one of Thraben Yu's videos, the best class is your favorite class. unless that class is the inventor, in which case, I'm sorry, my dude. And then also to share something that I recently saw on Reddit, credit to Garoon445. Just take a look at this. I'll provide a link in the description. Go upvote that one. It's pretty funny. Now on to number 26, with honestly a pretty huge gap in points between 27 and 26. Honestly, it's hard to describe just how rock bottom the inventor truly landed in these community rankings. Anyway, at number 26, it is the Psychic. Psychic, rank 26, 5 number 1 votes. My rank, 18. Total score, 8,840. Hey there, adventurers. Quick note from the editing room. We did this entire segment. We wrote it, we filmed it, we edited it, we even uploaded it before the Dark Archive remaster leak happened. So some of the things that we say in here are no longer accurate or are going to change soon. You might hear us talk about hopes for a remaster, and well, now we have the answers there. So sorry, it is what it is. We're not going to redo it. It takes a lot of work to get these collaborations going. It's hard enough planning around Paizo's release schedule, and it is even more difficult when that schedule happens not at the expected time. Back to the video. With the Psychic, we are going to see a bit of a theme emerging. Classes that have not been remastered yet tend to do pretty poorly in these rankings. Not universally, and not all remastered classes necessarily do well, but it is a trend. And I think that is because that starting with the Advanced Player's Guide pre-remaster, a lot of classes sort of gain these like, make a check to unlock your mechanic, or here's a bonus, but also here's a penalty if you're going to do that. And those sorts of features kind of feel awful compared to a lot of the original classes that didn't ever have such limitations, or compared to the remastered versions of those Advanced Player's Guide classes that no longer have those checks or no longer have the big downsides that they used to. Now, the Psychic, even though it is not yet remastered, is in theory a pretty cool class. It is a caster who does not focus on their focus spells or on spell slot spells, but instead on cantrips. They start off with a few standard cantrips that are available to everyone, but then they also have some specialty cantrips and a unique cantrip per subclass. So right off the bat, right from the start, their cantrips are better than cantrips available to other classes. And then they get 2 focus points, which are not actually used to cast focus spells, but instead are for basically turning their cantrips into focus spells by improving their power and abilities in a system called amping. They still have a few spells in spell slots, but it really is these powerful cantrips, their 2 focus points, and I should also mention their ability to restore 2 focus points with a single rest period that really makes them stand apart from other classes in the game. But that is not the only set of unique and powerful mechanics available to this class. They can also unleash their psyche, allowing them to use specialty abilities and or add extra damage to their spells for 2 rounds. This means that a Psychic with an unleashed psyche using a focus point to amp one of their specialty psi cantrips can do devastating amounts of damage. But after 2 rounds, the unleashed psyche effect ends and they are actually stupefied, debuffed for a few rounds. This can sort of lead to short periods of above average effectiveness, followed by periods of not feeling too helpful and, well, just sort of bad feelings overall. But already at number 26, we are seeing some very positive strengths in the system, because there certainly are people who praise the consistency of having amped cantrips and who find a lot of utility in the unleashed abilities. In fact, Prime Productions is quite a fan of the Psychic.
Hey guys, Prime Productions here. Rebel Then King has asked me to talk about the Psychic in Pathfinder, and so that's what I'm going to do. Now, a lot of people don't like the Psychic, but I think they're forgetting something. So, it's true that the Psychic only gets 2 spells per spell rank, and that's not a lot, I understand. But they also get 6 cantrips, and by level 10 they get up to 8, and then they can get more with feats. That's a lot of cantrips. Plus, a lot of their cantrips are unique, and some of them are just buffed versions. like the tangible dream psychic can cast shield on other people. That's really useful. In addition to that, psychics can also amp their cantrips, making them even more powerful. I would argue that their amped cantrips are about on par with a ranked spell slot, which means effectively by level 5, when they get their third focus point, they get 3 free ranked spells per fight, assuming you can take 30 minutes in between each fight to rest. That's really good, and a lot of renewable resources there. Now, another thing that people don't like about the psychics is their Psyche Unleashed ability. This says that if you cast a spell at the start of the next round as a free action, you can unleash your Psyche. While your Psyche is unleashed, you do extra damage with all of your spells, and you gain access to special Psyche Unleashed options. The downside is after 2 rounds of Psyche Unleashed, you fall out of it and become stupefied. And as you know, if you're stupefied, you have a chance to fizzle any spell that you cast. Now, this is bad, but there's a few things you need to remember. First of all, a lot of fights don't last beyond 3 rounds. And if you're smart about it, you can actually mitigate the downsides of being stupefied. If you cast one of your sustain spells, and a lot of psychics have damaging sustain spells, so if you cast one of those while your Psyche is unleashed, you can sustain it while you're stupefied. And those don't fizzle with stupefied. So if you cast one of them while your Psyche is unleashed, you can keep it going while stupefied and still be in the fight. Am I saying Psychic is the most powerful class in the world? No, of course not. But I do think it's a lot better than people give it credit for. So go check it out if you want to. It's actually pretty fun.
Some very good points about the Psychic there. Those amped cantrips really are closer to focus spells or even rank spells in power, and you do get to keep using them all day long. And those were also some good points about timing your Unleashed Psyche and mitigating the downsides. So all in all, even though it is ranked pretty low, the Psychic as is not a bad choice at all. And hopefully a remastered version of it will be even better. At number 25, we have another specialty book, somewhat niche class, the Gunslinger. Gunslinger, rank 25, 5 number 1 votes. My rank 27, total score 8,801. Now, to start off with, yes, this is my bottom ranked class, and it's mostly because I have some issues with the roleplay and flavor of the class. A lot of people counter that argument by saying, gunpowder's been around for a long time, and a gunslinger doesn't necessarily mean a cowboy with a 6-shooter standing next to your sorcerer. But, y'all, I see a lot of pretty cowboy-adjacent gunslinger art out there on Reddit, I'm just saying. And I do wonder if there are others like me, and the flavor of the class contributes to the ranking because, mechanically speaking, they are quite strong. In fact, I do say that they are the best option for playing a ranged damage build in the system. They are experts in firearms, and they get bonus extra damage automatically from singular expertise. They crit all the time and do huge amounts of damage due to the deadly and fatal properties on most of these firearms. Additionally, they have specialty reloads that give them a huge advantage over other marshals who might otherwise try to outshoot them. You might ask, well, why don't I just play as a fighter? They're also experts. Well, that is because you don't get specialty reloads and the singular expertise class feature that the Gunslinger has. Seriously, from a mechanical standpoint, they are quite potent. But perhaps shoot, reload, shoot can get a bit repetitive. And they can be pretty ineffective, actually, if they're not critting and or they are fighting a monster with resistance or immunity to their, resistance to their damage type. Everyone's ineffective if there's an immunity. That's because most firearms have pretty low regular damage and truly do rely on those crits for big bursts of damage. So if something has a resistance to your strikes, which I have seen, and the Gunslinger ends up not critting, they often will do literally no damage whatsoever because of that lower initial weapon damage die. So they're not the overall mechanical offensive powerhouse that the fighter is, nor are they consistently hard-hitting like the Barbarian. But again, they sure are a great ranged option. And let's talk about those reloads, because with those, you can mix in some port and melee and a lot of intrigue and interest in this class. The Way of the Drifter can make a melee strike while reloading. The Pistolero can create a diversion or demoralize while reloading. And the Spell Shot can recall knowledge while reloading. So really, they're kind of a class that, if you think about it, will have 4 actions every turn and can contribute in multiple ways. And there is another cool set of class features about the Gunslinger, their deeds. These are specialty free actions that you get to do during initiative. They let you do things like move 10 feet, draw a combination weapon and set it to your desired mode, set up a heavy firearm and a defensive parry and move, things like that. So it is not just reloading and shooting. There is a lot to this class. Clearly, though, just not enough to give it a higher rank. Now, typically, when I would personally rank this class pretty low, I would see a lot of defenses for this, more so than any other class. So I'm curious, this time around, with a community, an agreed upon kind of consensus low rank, are there still some, pretty adamant defenders of the Gunslinger out there? I have a feeling still that I'm going to see more defenses for this class than almost any other in the bottom 9. So start typing away if you are an absolute fan of the Gunslinger. At number 24, we have a class which I honestly feel a little bit bad for, because pre-remaster it was beloved by some for its flavor and disliked by others for its mechanics. Then it got a remaster, and now I think it's a little bit forgotten about by everybody. It's the Oracle. Oracle, rank 24, 5 number 1 votes. My rank, 19, total score, 8,463. Okay, so Oracles were, kind of still are, the reigning champion. I have power, but it hurts me to use that power, with their curse system. They are one of the most altered classes from pre-remaster to now, so I won't spend a lot of time talking about how it used to be. For now, what they have are unique curse-bound abilities. When you use these abilities, you do something cool, but you advance your curse, which puts penalties on you. And then you can reduce these penalties by refocusing outside of combat. Oracles used to actually get 2 focus spells right off the start, but now they have the pretty standard 1 focus point, 1 focus spell. To make up for this, they have joined the Sorcerer and Wizard with a maximum number of spell slots. That is quite nice. And I will say their focus spells tend to be pretty awesome. They are good combinations of damage and support, which is really my favorite way to play. So that is a huge plus for this class. And to talk even more about some of the good and maybe some of the bad of this class, let's turn it over to the local disaster tour guide.
Hello, travelers and tourists, or should I say, hello, adventurers. My name is Mark, and I am the local disaster tour guide. That's right, I'm a storyteller here to defend the Oracle in Pathfinder 2e. I need to address some concerns, highlight some strengths, and offer some inspiration in case you're not sure how to approach this class. So let's get started. When it comes to the Oracle, I think that the concerns really fall into one of 3 categories. Concerns about casters, difficulties with optimization, and, let's be honest, the Oracle's curse. So let's address those concerns really quick. The Oracle is a caster class, and there's a lot of conversation around casters in Pathfinder 2e. That's way too big of a topic for this video, but if you are struggling with how to approach casters, including the Oracle, I strongly recommend checking out Pathfinder. He has some great videos on the subject and can really help you navigate those issues well. As for optimization, I'll just be honest, optimization is not as important in Pathfinder 2e as a lot of people think it is. Pathfinder 2e is a game that rewards intelligent play and good teamwork, so as long as you're playing smart, you're going to be effective. So with those concerns out of the way, let's move on to the selling points of the class. And I know what you're thinking, Mark, you forgot to mention the Oracle's curse. But, plot twist for this video, the Oracle's curse is not a concern, it's a selling point of this class. The Oracle's curse is narrative gold because it is a classic example of the concept of power at a price. Your character trades restrictions on what they can do for extra power in a given area. By the way, this is not a unique concept to the Oracle. Barbarians come with rage, and there are restrictions associated with that ability. There are plenty of character concepts that play around with this idea, and the Oracle is just leaning into this with a lot of oomph, and it does it very well. This is a little bit of a side point, but the Oracle is one of the most unique classes that Paizo has ever published. You can find fighters and wizards and rogues in a lot of different games, but there's not a lot of classes that occupy the same niche as the Oracle, and that really causes the class to stand out. If you're looking for a unique experience, the Oracle is going to give you something you can't get in a lot of other games. But let's go back to this power at a price, because there's something you need to understand that is fundamental about this trade-off. And that is, Paizo has designed the Oracle where you control exactly how much power you gain and how much price you pay. At the start of the adventuring day, your Oracle's curse is flavor text. The penalties don't show up until you start using your powers, and you decide when and how you want to use those powers, meaning you control when and how the penalties come into effect. So, you have the choice. You can dip your toes in the water and take a little bonus for a little penalty, or you can dive in the deep end and really push how far your character can go. The choice is up to you. A couple of summers ago, I did a video called the Anathemaru. This is a oracle that has gained divine power by deliberately violating the anathema of every deity in the Golarion campaign setting. It is a hilarious meme build. I had a ton of fun with it, and if you're looking for some inspiration on what you can do with an oracle, check it out. I've asked Rebel to include a link in the video description below. But as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation. Rebel, back to you.
I will say this is a class I always kind of struggled with and never got too excited about, but post remaster, I've actually built out some pretty cool Oracle ideas that I really like. I have a time Oracle in particular that I'm quite excited about right now. So yeah, I feel a bit bad that the Oracle is towards the bottom at number 24, but hey, it is what it is. Before we get to number 23, just a quick reminder to check out classfinder2e.com. This is a site that I set up to help you look at all of the classes in the system and quickly get an idea of what might be best for you. Once all of these class ranking videos are out, I will be adding a popularity stat to all of the other stats that I have on the site. So make sure to bookmark classfinder2e.com and subscribe to this channel for updates on that project and for the rest of the videos in this community class ranking series. Now, back to the ranking. At number 23, we have yet another pre-remaster class. I told you it was going to be a trend. Also, one of the most unique classes in the game, the only truly two-for-one character class, the Summoner. Summoner, rank 23, 8 number 1 votes. My rank, 25, total score 8,419.4. I say the Summoner is unique in their 2-for-1 build, even though yes, there is the Construct Companion Inventor. There are animal companions for rangers and druids. There are familiars, etc. But the Summoner and their Eidolon is the only way that the Summoner is built. It's not just a single subclass option, and the two truly are dependent on each other. They share hit points. They share actions. They can share senses. They are truly connected in a way that no other character plus one option in the system is. And this actually might be what leads some to a lower ranking. Look, having 4 actions on every turn and having a martial melee Eidolon and a spell casting summoner, all of that should be great. But I think, and I know for me personally, the split of emphasis sort of on 2 characters ends up being a worse option than a nice focus on a single character, or at least on a main character and then a supporting character. I also think that because the Eidolon mechanics are unique to summoners, they are not shared with the way that familiars and companions work, it is maybe a bit tough to take the time to learn this specialty class and set of rules and really understand and get into the gameplay style. But wow, in the right hands, they are truly powerful. To talk more about that, let's turn it over to Team Player Gaming.
Hello, team players. Today I'd like to talk about the Summoner and why it isn't the garbage class that some people think it is. First, Act Together effectively allows you to have 4 actions instead of 3 if you use 3 actions on it, and maybe even more. You do have to divide it up between yourself and your Eidolon, but having effectively 4 actions is nuts. Think about it. You can summon a creature, and then your Eidolon still gets 1 action. Then next turn, you can sustain that summon, then use 2 actions on Act Together, effectively giving you 5 actions. So you could cast another spell and have your Eidolon attack, or you could attack and have your Eidolon use one of its abilities that requires 2 actions. And it allows you to choose how your Eidolon works, while other animal companions have a specific way that they work, and you can't change it without changing the companion. But the Summoner's Eidolon can be changed simply by retraining the feats. You want a Dragon's Breath weapon? Choose the Dragon Eidolon. You want it to cast spells? Take Magical Understudy, and so much more. Plus you can have any spell list you want, just like the Witch and the Sorcerer. Teamwork is a breeze when there are so many ways you can use your Eidolon. And action economy is a big deal in Pathfinder. So you should try playing a Summoner if you haven't already, before you say it's bad. I'm going to turn things back to Rebel Then King now, but remember, teamwork is vital. It helps us solve problems.
So, although the Summoner can definitely be a great choice for some, it is clearly not for everyone, landing it at number 23. Now, onto a class which I pretty much always ranked pretty low, the community always defended vigorously, a class that got majorly improved in the remaster, although maybe not so much because it's only at number 22, the Investigator. Investigator, rank 22. 9 number 1 votes. My rank, 21. Total score, 8,245.2. The community sometimes has a question for the Investigator. Why aren't you just a rogue racket? Why aren't you just a rogue subclass? I've always had one question for the Investigator. What do you do when your devise a stratagem roll isn't going to work? And also a question for the entire community. Who actually fully understands how devise a stratagem works? So, devise a stratagem. It is the core combat mechanic of the Investigator. The way it works is that you take an action, sometimes a free action, to make a roll, an attack roll, not an attack, to make just the roll against a particular creature. And when doing so, you get to add your intelligence rather than dex or strength modifier for the purposes of calculating the outcome of that attack. The thing is, the next strike you make against that creature that you devise a stratagem against on your turn must use the outcome of that roll, whether it is good or bad. And my first and biggest issue with this mechanic is that I think it's just too complicated, evidenced by the number of times I have seen it done incorrectly. I know I'm going to ruffle some feathers here. I have before. But honestly, a lot of times when I've talked about this class and this particular mechanic before, people have defended it, and in that defense, they have got the mechanics wrong. I've heard, well, it's really great because if you devise a stratagem and you know that strike isn't going to land, you just do a regular attack instead. But you can't. You have to use the results of that devised stratagem on your next strike. I have heard, well, if you've got a middle roll and you are pretty confident that's going to miss the boss, but you are pretty confident it's going to hit the mook, just transfer over and attack them. But that is also not the way it works. You don't get to transfer that roll to another target. It is against that target and only that target. I have heard it used to add intelligence to damage, which is not correct. It's just the attack roll. I've heard it used multiple times in a round. First of all, you very rarely would even have the action economy to do that. And second, it is specifically limited to once per round. It gets misinterpreted so many ways. And you can argue as much as you'd like that it makes sense to you or you think it's good. but the number of goofs that I have seen make it pretty clear to me that it's just not super well understood in the system. Now, issue number 2 that I have with Devise a Stratagem was partially addressed in the remaster, which I got excited about, but now realize I still don't love as much as I thought. The question is, what realistically do you do when you know you're going to miss? Do you run across the map to attack another creature? Well, that's kind of a lot of wasted actions. Do you just recall knowledge as your second action and then try to trip them? That's actually not a bad plan. Do you perform other skill checks? Now with the new skill stratagem, it's a brand new mechanic in the remaster. The thing is, it limits you to wisdom, intelligence, or charisma-based skill checks or perception. But, you could demoralize. That would be nice, and you do get a bonus to that. The point is, though, it still feels a little bit to me like when you know you're not going to hit with Devise a Stratagem, you are just kind of out of luck, which is not a super fun core mechanic. But to defend this class a bit, out of combat, holy cow. Intelligence-based, with lots of skill training and extra skill feats. You have the core mechanics of Pursue a Lead and Clue In. It is just a monster. I mean, a powerhouse at figuring out all of the mysteries that are standing in between you and that last chapter of the book of your adventure path. It is the go-to exploration mystery-solving class. And to defend Devise a Stratagem, a comment on one of my earlier videos said, if they get a fatal firearm, they can pull it out just when they know they will crit. And you know what? That is true. That is a great use of Devise a Stratagem. It can be great for having 2 weapons, one that does a higher regular damage dice, but then one that is a crit specialty, with a deadly or fatal property. And you absolutely can make that Devise a Stratagem roll and then decide which weapon you want to use. It can work very well. I will also say Devise a Stratagem is quite good for ranged combatants because you can stand in one place, devise a stratagem here. If that's going to hit, go for it and do that extra precision damage from range. That's a good ability. If it's not going to miss, oh well, you don't have to move your feet. You can just shoot over there instead. So it can be quite a powerful class mechanic. It just takes some more creative thinking. And remember that Devise a Stratagem can be used as a free action if you are already pursuing a lead. And the text which describes when exactly this can be a free action is a bit more generous than it used to be, and it's kind of open to interpretation, so I think realistically you can expect to use Devise a Stratagem as a free action more often. Oh, and also, more defense of this class, the Forensic Medicine subclass makes a fantastic martial healer. So despite some of the problems, this is still a highly recommended class for those who want to rely primarily on their intelligence to navigate their adventures. At number 21, we have another intelligence-based martial, one that has historically been not super popular in the community, but is definitely faring better now, the Alchemist. Alchemist, rank 21, 12 number 1 votes. My rank, 9. Total score, 8,144.6. Now this is yet another class that, like the Oracle, is massively changed from pre-remaster to now. Just an insane amount of updates to this class. I actually played a full campaign as a pre-remaster Alchemist, so I definitely felt a lot of pain in that. But the new Alchemist, if anything, is overcorrected and too mechanically strong now. Not that it mattered all that much in these rankings. I think that what it comes down to is that Alchemist builds and Alchemist gameplay ranges the entire span of quality. The wrong build in the wrong hands in the wrong situation could be a completely terrible, truly awful character. But a well-built Alchemist in the hands of a strong player can be a perfect 10 out of 10, overpowered, extremely effective build. That's because they don't do anything per se, but they do make things. Specifically elixirs, bombs, poisons, mutagens. And they can use those as weapons, to improve attacks, other skill checks, to heal, to debuff, and on and on and on. So knowing all this relies knowing your formulas to begin with, knowing a bunch of conditions in the game, how those conditions work, knowing your enemy, knowing your allies, and knowing the alchemist's completely unique and twofold approach to tracking ingredients and making concoctions. And this is why I have seen comments on some of my videos that said, alchemists can adapt to a situation outside their field by changing which items they create. Absolutely. You can make stuff on the fly all day long. It is a solid choice for any campaign, but I did see a comment left on a Thraben U video that said, but as a GM, it is on my soft ban list for new people due to needing some extra preparation and attention. It's not an easy class to play. It is a powerhouse of a class. It's just tough. But wow, in the right hands, again, it can provide amazing utility. For more on that, let's turn it over to 20-Sided Ventures.
Hey, Ryan here from 20-Sided Ventures. Really want to thank Rebel Then King for this project and inviting many of us to collaborate and come along and talk about the results of this great community poll. As a pretty big fan of The Alchemist, rating it much higher than it received in the community poll, I decided to volunteer to speak to its finer points and perhaps maybe convince some of you that it is a little bit better than where it landed. The greatest thing about The Alchemist is it is the Swiss Army knife of any party. With the changes in formulas, it is very easy with some downtime or even just a little bit of gold to fully fill out a crafting folio and have access to nearly every common alchemical item whenever you need it, allowing you to solve for many problems, be this healing over time, vaccines to prevent diseases, mutagens to grant you various immunities or boosts to solve the problem at hand, or simply having the correct bomb that can exploit a weakness or provide the correct debuff to really help in the moment. With the changes in Remaster, where the Alchemist also can regenerate their vials, with a simple 10-minute rest, you are well situated to solve any problem at hand. You can be a fantastic healer. You can be an excellent damage dealer. You get a good amount of damage on a miss when you're exploiting the correct vulnerabilities. You can be a debuffer and a general problem solver. So don't discount an alchemist in your party. They're a fantastic addition to any adventuring group and are a primary candidate for a non-magical healer with their ability to utilize craft in place of medicine. They are also just a good skill class because they're going to be high in intelligence for their key stat and will have access to a wide range of knowledge and skill sets.
So there is a lot to think about with The Alchemist. The Alchemist will always have a special place in my heart. I love the roleplay and the flavor of this class, and it is a dream for more seasoned players. It's just clearly not for everybody. And now that we're getting close to the top of the bottom 9, another promising class that I think is a victim of not yet being remastered. At number 20, the classic spell sword, the Magus. Magus, rank 20, 9 number 1 votes. My rank 17. Total score 8,128.2. I think that the Magus has a very fun and well-designed set of abilities that all work together, if you can pull them off perfectly. It is a class that is so close to being devastatingly powerful all the time, but is often just a bit, and I just mean a bit, short on the actions necessary to do what it wants to do. What I'm talking about specifically here is its 3 main abilities: Spell Strike, Conflux spells, and Arcane Cascade. Spell Strike is a spell imbued into a weapon strike for 2 actions. When these hit, it deals both the weapon and the spell damage, and wow, is that a lot. Spell Strike, though, can't be used again until it is recharged, but that can be done by casting your Conflux spell, which is a focus spell. And then finally, after casting any spell actually, you can choose to drop into an arcane stance and continue to deal extra spell damage with each of your strikes with Arcane Cascade. It is a really cool set of abilities that all feed off of each other. And also, before I forget, because I always seem to, the subclasses also grant you some additional bonuses while in the Arcane Cascade stance. Sometimes it's a boost to speed or to damage in certain situations or to athletics checks, etc. It's actually kind of similar to the way that this Swashbuckler's Panache works, I think. So even more reason to use all of the Magus abilities in conjunction with each other. But the class has gained a bit of a reputation for being hit and miss. You take an action to get into position, and then you miss with a spell strike, and that's your turn. And then maybe on your next turn, you use your Conflux spell to recharge. Well, the Conflux spells usually are an attack as well, so you go ahead and make a strike there, and maybe that hits, cool. But then you go for spell strike again, but due to the multiple attack penalty, you miss again. Now, I still think this is actually fairly balanced, because that spell strike at level 1 can deal as much as like a 1d10 or 1d12 plus 4 strength from your weapon, plus like a 2d6 or 3d4 from a spell, from a cantrip. That's like 16 or 17 points of damage at level 1. That is going to wipe pretty much anything you face off the battle map with one strike. That is crazy. And if you could do that reliably every single round, it would be way, way overpowered. That being said, though, I do think that people find the inconsistency maybe a bit frustrating, and thus it's in the bottom 9. It's towards the top of the bottom 9, but it's in the bottom 9. So, the Inventor is the class that people don't even remember exists, landing it at dead last, right? And this class, at number 19, is a class that I see no one really talking about, at least not in the conversations I've seen around this class ranking project. At number 19, the Ranger. Ranger, rank 19, 8 number 1 votes. My rank, 14. Total score, 8,123.4. The Ranger is, I think, a pretty cool martial class. It almost has the feel of a near martial, given that it has an emphasis on nature and survival and out of combat tracking with hunted prey, which is a great exploration boon. But you know what? It is still a full martial, being able to use either dexterity or strength as its key ability. It's got full accuracy. It can use martial weapons. It has great combat bonuses, but only on its singular hunted prey. And I think that might be the biggest drawback of this class. If you are in a fight against a pack of rats or a bunch of spiders, and you have to take an action to hunt prey, make a good strike, and then when that creature dies, either from your strike or from an ally's, on your next turn you have to take another action to hunt prey again, it starts to add up and eat through your actions pretty quickly. That can definitely slow the Ranger down, but it is not the only class that works that way. It's pretty similar to the Thaumaturge, so it's really not that bad. And again, Hunt Prey does have mechanics outside of combat as well, which I think is pretty cool. A Hunt Prey will actually grant you a +2 bonus to seek and track your prey, which gives you almost a pseudo-investigator-like ability to track something down. And remember, if you are hunting prey before combat starts, you don't need to take an action to use it in combat. So if you are tracking something and you catch up to it, you are already hunting prey and you don't have to use an action to do so in combat. Additionally, the Ranger has a bunch of sort of knowledge and know thy enemy, figure out what's going on type of feats. And Rangers do have access to some focus spells for healing, for support, for extra damage. There aren't too many full martials that get any consideration whatsoever for things that take place outside of combat encounters, so I enjoy that aspect of this class quite a lot. It is a good reminder, as we've seen with pretty much this entire list in the bottom 9, that pretty much any class in this game is going to be fun and viable in most settings. In fact, I have actually chosen a thrown weapon ranged specialist Ranger for my next campaign, which I am looking forward to very much. There are so many good Ranger feats that are bringing this. I actually had the idea of thrown specialist before a class, that the Ranger is bringing it to life. I can, at level 2, pick up the quick draw feat, allowing me to draw and throw a weapon with one action. And then also remember that with Hunt Prey, you get to ignore the penalty for making ranged attacks in the second ranged increment of your weapon. That's important for me as a thrown weapon specialist, because these weapons often have a pretty short range to them. Well, guess what? My 20-foot throwing dagger is now a 40-foot throwing dagger, basically, because I am playing as a Ranger. It seriously is a fantastic class. Well, that was a lot of fun, and I want to know what you think, adventurers. Were there any big surprises in that bottom 9? Is anybody sad to see their favorite class in there? What about a ranking that doesn't surprise you at all? Let's talk about that in the comments. Until then, remember that we have 2 more videos in this series with a bunch more fun data and insightful collaborations from other creators. So stay tuned for the middle 9, which should be coming out in a few weeks.